Good morning, it's Eva. I'm going to do a two-part series now on video talking about the topic I brought up on my podcast, which was the problem of evil, where I talked about Heart of Darkness, which is the book behind Apocalypse Now, and I talked about the story of Cain and Abel, and I went through Frankenstein, and just sort of went through different representations in art or literature or film, and of course the Bible scripture that examined the concept of, what is evil and what does it have to do with being a human being, and what is the actual battle, within us between light and dark, evil and good, and how much of that is under our control and how much of it is out of our control. I went over several mental illnesses and addictions, and I'm going to expand on that. First, I'm going to start off with, I said like 3 times already. Sorry, it's like, this is my new office, and it's like sweltering in here because there's no AC, and I haven't found a fan in my house yet that I could use. And yeah, I'm not a good hot weather person, and so sorry about that. All right, so I'm going to start off reading a poem, and it's by Anne Sexton, and she actually has some other poems. I thought, oh, well, if we're talking about evil, maybe I should read some of these other poems, because she's got one called Evil Eye. She has another one about a witch's life, and I think another one after Auschwitz. But I was like, no, I'm just going to do the one I know. I've known this poem since I was like maybe 17 years old, and it was a poem that really, like, I would always think about it as I went through different stages of life. It's called The Awful Rowing Towards God, which is actually the name of the book. And it's kind of how we as human beings would be, the idea of, I guess, God being like an island, and like we're trying to communicate with this island, but it's like we're way out at sea, and we can't hear or get good enough, I don't know, what do you want to call it, like guidance to get to land. So in this, it's basically her, and she's in a rowboat. So of course it's a metaphor, so she's not really in a real rowboat. Get it? Okay. Oh, and these aren't my regular glasses, so I lost them again. Okay. A story, let it go, let it come. I was stamped out like a Plymouth fender into this world. First came the crib with its glacial bars, then dolls, and the devotion to their plastic mouths. Then there was school, and the little straight rows of chairs, blotting my name over and over, but under sea all the time. A stranger I felt I was, whose elbows wouldn't work. Then there was life with its cruel houses and people who seldom touched, though touch is all. But I grew like a pig in a trench coat. I grew. And then there were many strange apparitions, the nagging rain, the sun turning into poison, and all of that saws working through my heart. And I grew and I grew. And God was out there like an island I had not rowed to. Still ignorant of him, my arms, my legs worked, and I grew and I grew. I wore rubies and bought tomatoes, and now in my middle age, about 19 in my head, I'd say, I'm rowing, though the oarlocks stick and are rusty, and the sea blinks and rolls like a worried eyeball, but I'm rowing through the wind pushes me back, and I know that the island will not be perfect. It will have the flaws of life, the absurdities of the dinner table, and there will be a door, and I will open it, and I will get rid of this rat deep inside me, the gnawing, pestilent rat. God will take it with his 2 hands and embrace it. As the African tale says, this is the tale which I have told. If it be sweet, if it be not sweet, take somewhere else and let some return to me. The story ends with me still rowing. I don't remember that last. I remember the line about Africa, but I don't remember that part. Okay, anyway. See, Anne Sexton was very famous in the island, late 50s, maybe early 60s, or maybe it was all the 50s. And she was well known for writing about being extremely honest about having bipolar disorder. And she kept journals. She had a huge collection of diaries and letters for her and our psychiatrist for like years and years and years. And she was very good about sort of publishing all that kind of stuff and like being very open about it. And I think she helped, honestly, a lot of people, though I think she herself was, deeply troubled. And I think she just sort of held it together for, when she was going on tour for writing and to get her books done and raise her kids in the suburbs. And then I think, she would just sort of numb herself a lot with alcohol, and then, she'd go through awful manic episodes. And she just had a really difficult time of it. But at the same time, she was very open in a way that, like, in the 50s and early 60s, people were not being, especially women, were not being honest like that about mental illness. And I feel like she committed suicide at some point. I can't remember now. I have to go look at that, because I was looking up Sylvia Plath more. Okay, Sylvia Plath was a poet. Her famous book was The Bell Jar. Really famous. And the whole concept of the bell jar was basically like she had something called schizoid disorder. That's what they call it now. And what it is basically the symptoms of schizophrenia, and they're combined with the symptoms of bipolar. So you would have sort of you wouldn't be diagnosed as a schizophrenic, because you wouldn't have as bad of symptoms that they have. But then as far as bipolar, if somebody was treating you and thinking that's what you had, and then they spend any time with you, they would realize that you had the strangest case of bipolar they'd ever seen. And perhaps the medications would not be working on you. And that's because it would be the mixture of the two disorders together. And that's what people thought Sylvia Plath had. And she would always talk about this bell jar idea, which was the idea of, sorry, I'm getting a picture of the bell jar. When she would have episodes, well, she was also had major depressive disorder. And she would talk about when she would have episodes of really dark depression or having suicidal thoughts. She would describe it was like a bell jar would descend on her and seal her in it. So it's like she couldn't escape her feelings, and it would keep her like isolated from really communicating with other people to get help, or to really let them know what was going on, because the bell jar would be sealed. Like if you put a bell jar down, it kind of seals onto the surface. And that was like a very, at the time, very famous book. It was pretty much about her early days. She went off to college, and she had a pretty strict, controlling mom, and her father, I think she had been very close with, but I think he had some issues of his own with control. And she wrote a poem about him that was quite dark, about him and his hobby, I think, was beekeeping. It was something about that, but it was like about the relationship. Very strange, dark writing, but really explicit, kind of really talking about how a dysfunctional relationship, whether it's with a parent or a significant other or a sibling or child, can really affect you severely. So Sylvia Plath had a pretty successful life. She became a writing professor. She was, what do you call it when people get like a laureate, baccalaureate, I don't know, advanced recognition for her academics in college as a student. She unfortunately married Ted Hughes, who was also a poet at the time, but in my personal opinion, kind of an asshole. And he, constantly was, I don't know, he's very dismissive of her. I honestly think that he was a little jealous, because she was really much more famous poet than he was. And he ended up having an affair, I believe, with a Russian woman, if I remember this right. And I guess they had 2 young children. I want to say a boy and a girl, but she had another episode of a dark depression and with the suicidal thoughts. And she ended up, when the kids were sleeping and he was off with that woman, she put her head in a stove and died of the gas. So I think she was maybe late 30s, early 40s. She was young. And the other mental illness, she was thought to either have the schizoid, which I just talked about, or there was talk that she had borderline personality disorder, which is like a cluster B personality disorder, which would really be it's kind of like I don't want to say it wrong, histrionic disorder, which is, they're both kind of extreme, where you have extreme emotional episodes. There's a extreme fear of abandonment, and like no matter how good their lives are, they can't seem to take personal responsibility for things. They often will blame other people, and that they truly believe that's what happened, that it's somebody else's fault, and they become quite I don't want to say hysterical. They become quite dysregulated, like in their attachment disorder, and they'll often really always feel like they're, they have to chase after people, or that they're being abandoned, or that something that they're unloved. That's like the big theme of BPD, is that you feel basically like chronically unloved, and that you also have the traits where, unfortunately, the symptoms of it are kind of the habits that would be considered like things that would cause it's like you would behave in a way almost like you know, were under the influence of something, where you act irrational, right? And you would make the other person so uncomfortable that they would actually end up leaving, because they just can't, it's impossible, you know, you can't, it's not a flexible disorder. It's not like something where you could rationally talk to somebody and sort of convince them that, you know, they were not seeing things correctly. Usually, borderline is like not, people don't take it as seriously as schizophrenia or bipolar. But to me, you know, the people who have it, they seem to be in like deep pain and suffering. Like they seem very like kind of taken over by it, and it's more as like a severe anxiety. So bipolar there's two different kinds of bipolar. There's bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. Bipolar 1 would be where you would have like more manic episodes. They used to call it, oh my gosh, I can't even say it. I'll remember in a minute. I used to have a different designated title for it, like a form of depression. But then they, the DSM changed it. I don't know when they did that, but at least 3 decades ago, I would think. But the bipolar 1 is much lighter episodes. You wouldn't have hallucinations. You wouldn't have true mania. Mania being like, you might go gamble, spend all your money. You might have sexual deviation, or spend impulsively. You would do things that during your manic episodes, like almost you get in sort of like a hyper state where it's like you're almost feeling like you're on top of the world. Many people who are artists or musicians or writers have had bipolar. I think Carrie Fisher might have been one of the, you know, who played Princess Leia. She had it, and she was extremely honest about, you know, her struggles with it. She actually had electroshock therapy, which like nobody has that anymore. It was like something they did in the 50s that like actually messed up a lot of people, but she swore by it. So I guess maybe some people can tolerate it. That would be like where they would put like electrodes on your head, and then they would, you know, put the currents in you, and then that somehow that would like sort of jump your system, and you would have less symptoms of your mental health disorder. So, but they used to do like lobotomies and stuff in the 50s, so, you know, it kind of got lumped in that category of like extreme therapies where like the psychiatric society or whatever was like sort of promoting it, but yet they knew that a lot of people were like not responding well, but they sort of didn't have anything else as a cure, so it kind of just became this sort of de facto thing. And it, you know, like I said, most people didn't do that great with it, but some people did. I was going to also bring up disorders of, I did bring up Stockholm Syndrome last time, which is like where you would like identify, like if you were like kidnapped or something, you would identify with the person who took you, or your captor, or like it happens a lot in like, you know, when I hold people hostage. I talked last time about the Patty Hearst case, which is probably the most famous one. It's very much kind of like cults, where people who come out of cults are sometimes diagnosed with it, because what happens is, even though the people who are, sorry, that's my cats, the people who are holding them hostage or taking away their freedom, kidnapping them, whatever, you know, have them under their control, even though they're doing things to them against their will, at some point the survival instinct sort of kind of goes off track, and what happens is you would actually start thinking of your captor as maybe like, instead of you're not being raped, you know, you have a relationship, like they're somebody, they're your mentor, they're somebody who only wants the best for you. So then you follow their directions more, and you're very subservient, almost like a, I don't know, just a very strange controlled relationship. Only you would be the one who would be under their control, but it's like you're willingly giving it. And a lot of psychological studies of this say it might be because you're okay, like after so many days, weeks, months, whatever, of this being, you know, held in that way, like your nervous system is just so, your fight or flight is just so out of whack, and you and your body is trying to keep itself from falling into like a deep depression, or losing hope. So this identifying with the person who's hurting you is kind of like your body's way of, I mean, it's like sometimes our bodies and our minds, like we're supposed to be mind, body, spirit, and it's all supposed to interconnect in this wonderful way. But when you have psychological disturbances, sometimes it'll be like the body and mind will fight against each other. So it's kind of an example of that. So it's like, in order for your body to not rebel, because it's been under so much mental strain for so long, and probably you're probably dehydrated, you're probably not getting food or sleep like you're supposed to, because you're in like, you know, what do you call it? Like you're in circumstances, you're in an environment in where you're being made to do things or live a certain way and not eat, or you know what I mean, like you're under extreme physical capture or whatever. So your mind is like, okay, we'll just start to befriend whatever is hurting us, and then that way we'll stay alive longer. Because whenever you work with nature instead of against it, you know, the likelihood of living longer is there. So it's like your body basically like tricks your mind into this sort of disorder or whatever, to protect it and to keep the body going, and so it doesn't, you know, really start to deteriorate rapidly, you know. So why did I come up with Stockholm Syndrome? What were we talking about? Oh, talking about mental disorders and diabolical diabolical instances, right? Okay, bad things happening. I don't know if anyone's seen this beautiful lady. I can't pronounce her name. It's really, really hard to say. Her name is Sarma Melingolis, I think. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. And she's from New York City, and there was a documentary about her on YouTube. I couldn't get enough of it. I would think it was on Netflix too, and anyway, basically what it's about, it's called Bad Vegan, and this is actually one of her famous cooking books, which in the 90s was like the vegan like Bible, was Sarma. She had like one of the first extraordinarily successful vegan restaurants in the city, and it got nationwide attention. She was considered like sort of the it girl of the foodie world, and she did raw food, which if you don't know much about raw food, it's exactly what it sounds like. You don't heat it at all. Like they have this whole thing where they think when you heat food, it's actually killing the nutrients, so you should always have raw food. But she would make these sort of amazing, elaborate raw food dishes, and all the famous people went there, celebrities and intellectuals and whatever. There's a picture of her at one of her restaurants. Okay, why am I bringing her up? Because she had, I don't know what you want to call it, disorder, came on by being, I guess it's more like Stockholm Syndrome, but it was extreme. What happened was she fell in love with this guy. I guess he was going to a restaurant, and like none of the people who worked there, because it was all like a big family, and like everybody loved her as the boss and stuff, and it was a restaurant can be very like almost like the people become a family, because the hours are so terrible that you end up spending more time with your coworkers than you do with your own family. And so, and a lot of the people who worked at these restaurants were younger, trendy, or like what happened was this guy she got involved with and married, he was like some kind of con artist, or I don't know if yeah, that's what it was. He had like an extreme gambling problem, and so what he ended up doing is some kind of mind control thing on her. Like, I'm not even kidding you. She had this like for months, like maybe it was like almost 2 years by the time it was all said and done. But it was like, first he got her to like slowly take off her control of the restaurant and put him in charge of the restaurant. So like he was doing like things that he had like no idea like how to do, and like all the staff had to sort of follow him because she had put him in charge. And then she had this dog, I feel like it was like a Rottweiler, I'm not sure, but it's a beautiful dog. And somehow she was very close to the dog. Somehow he convinced her by like psychological manipulation. I don't know if he was a narcissist, or I don't know what this guy's problem was, but he was convinced her that if she should basically like sign over the money part of the business, put him in charge of like, paying people and all that kind of stuff, and like the revenue from the business. Like he would be her like business partner, I guess, only like she wouldn't really have a say in anything, and she had to do everything he said, so it's not really like the best business partnership, right? So And this is, you know, of course, before internet and everything. So she, I guess she's just bewitched by him. I don't know what happens. I mean, she didn't seem to have any kind of severe addiction. She does get extraordinarily thin by the time the whole thing's over with. Like, so I don't know if she was like just not, you know, like if part of his psychological crap was like, you know, not letting her eat or something, or like convincing her she didn't need to. I don't know, but he convinced her somehow, some way to have him in charge of all this stuff. And then what ended up happening is he started with her signatures and stuff, permissions. She would feed his gambling addiction, and it would just get worse and worse and worse and worse. And he needed more and more and more money. So at one point, you know, he had this. At one point, nobody was getting paid. Like, everybody was basically working there. Like, they were told that there had been like some kind of problem with the investors, which that wasn't true. And then later the investors got wind of it, so it was a big to-do. And what he did is he kind of like sent her on these weird missions. Like, he would like say, oh, we're gonna do this business meeting in Brussels or something, but you know, you need to go ahead of me. So she would go ahead of him, and then like he would just never show up, right? Because he's a gambling addict, right? So I think we all know where he was, but I don't even know if he was in the same country with her. But it's like he would give her these crazy missions to do for like, he would say like these people were out to get him. I don't know if he had a mental illness too, or if this was just like part of his mind control of her, and that, you know, he would never, I don't know, he would like then send her to like another country, and then like meanwhile her restaurant is just, no one's getting paid, and her business is like, you know, slowly going down the tubes, and it is like the hottest thing. And eventually it's just like he convinces her that he can keep her dog alive forever by like, I don't know, like what was it? It was like, I don't, some crazy shit, like, I don't know, like that these business people he was with or something had like something about DNA or something where you could like, you know how like you heard these things where like they can keep people, you can bring back your pet, or like keep your pet, I don't know, like people, like rich people pay to like live forever and be put in, you know, like when they die they want to be put in some kind of like weird incubation thing, and they think that they're actually going to wake up later, or something like that. And she actually believed him. And so yeah, they ended up, I want to say they finally, oh yeah, they got caught. I think it was at Dollywood. And the kicker, the ironic, horrible part is they got caught because he ordered a pizza. So that was like the big joke of the movie, like a vegan ordering a pizza, then you really know something's gone wrong. So they both end up going to prison. I'm sure that she made some sort of efforts to pay back all these people, but I don't know with what money she would have done that with. So I will look up and find out what they diagnosed both of them with. I mean, I don't know if his was a mental disorder. I think he just was a scam artist. But that's an example of kind of like just highly educated woman, amazing personality. So it's kind of nuts that something like that happened with her. What's some of the other things I was going to talk about? I think I will save some of this other stuff for another video because I feel like I'm getting up there on time with this. I think the only other one I was really going to talk about was Little Children, which was a movie with Kate Winslet and Jude Law, maybe. And it's kind of about this suburban couple. They're having an affair in the suburbs, like whatever. And they all go to this pool with their kids. And then it turns out that there is a pedophile who's been incarcerated. You know, he lives with his mom, and he's finally out. And so there's all this to do in the neighborhood, of course, about that, because people are afraid for their children. And then the community ends up, like, you know, painting like horrible stuff on his garage door and his mom's car, all this stuff. And sort of the whole crux of the book is really asking that question, you know, is someone who has pedophilia, is that something that develops? Are they born with it? And there's no way for them to, you know, like, they couldn't do a 12-step program or something like that, or, you know, like having them not be around children or playgrounds or whatever, it's just not gonna work. They're gonna still reoffend. It's a sad book, but I'm not gonna tell you what happens, but he ends up doing something where it's like, he does a very violent act against his own body, kind of as like a punishment to himself. And I saw like a documentary about, I think it's off Seattle. There's an island where people have been incarcerated for huge long periods of time, pedophilia, maybe some other sexual disorders or deviancies, that they'll afterwards they can go live on this island with other people who have the same disorder, and like it's like they can come and go as they want, but it's almost like a way for them to not have to worry about like not being able to get housing because of their them having a record, you know, being on a sexual predator list. It was actually kind of fascinating, I must say. And there was like a couple of women there too, which was pretty rare for women to have that kind of disorder. I think the last thing I'll talk about is, I don't know if anybody knows about the Stanford prison experiment. Did I talk about that at all before? I can't remember. But Stanford prison experiment happened, I want to say the early 70s. And what it wasn't very long. It was like, I want to say it was less than a week. Maybe it was a full week. But what it was at Stanford University, they had students who volunteered to be part of this study where you could either be a prisoner or you could be a guard. And you had to follow all these rules, like to act like the role that you were supposed to be. But what ended up happening, like, they rigorously interviewed these people, and, you know, they didn't let people in who had like severe addictions or like mental illnesses that they weren't treating. You know, I mean, it was pretty strict to get in there. But once the people were in there, it was like they started doing sadistic things to the people who were officers, correction officers. They didn't have guns, but they had like those battalion things, and they beat up some of the prisoner people, and then they also made them wear rip up their uniform somehow, or they gave them dresses. They did something where it's like they made them wear dresses, which as to humiliate them, which is actually a tactic of, like, there's one famous sheriff in, like, out west who did that. Really can't stand him, but he would do those humiliation rituals that were supposed to be, like, punitive and, like, cause people to not reoffend. But so the Stanford prison experiment, somebody almost died during it, and it just went completely out of control. Why am I telling you this? Because the whole point is, if you give people access to power, and then you give them access to no consequences, what happens when nobody's looking? Like, will people choose to be more like their animal baser self and cheat and use this opportunity to cheat, as in, like, they're supposed to be, like, just keeping them, you know, in their cells, or, you know, letting them out for different shower or eating or whatever, but they're not supposed to be humiliating them or making them do weird stuff for their own entertainment. So it's like, if somebody knows, like, there's no cameras there, if they know that they are not being watched, and they're suddenly given power over another person, will they sort of get out their own frustrations by, like, hurting this person because they know they can get away with it, because since they're, like, the correction officer, they're not really going to be held accountable, which that experiment pretty much, and they had to stop it because it got so violent, but that was the big question. Or would it be people would stick to how they act in society normally, and not take the opportunity when they had it to act out in ways that they don't normally get to act out in their regular lives. So that was kind of the whole point of that. I was gonna maybe at another time do something on Diane Arbus. She was an incredibly famous photographer, and the reason I bring her up is because she went around taking photographs of, like, people who were in, like, freak shows, like in circuses, like back when they were allowed to do that and stuff. And she would go around and, like, basically take photos of people who were considered morally, like, on the outskirts of society. So she would take a lot of, she took a lot of photographs of, like, people who were transitioning, like, way back when, and when it was considered, it wasn't even legal to do some of the things these people were doing. But, and she goes, and she, like, if, like, she looks at people, like, if she finds out that, there was somebody who was, like, if she finds out, like, you know, the fat lady at the freak show, or, like, the tallest man, or, like, she interviews, like, people who are, like, giants, people who are, like, basically, like, anybody in the outskirts of society. I think she photographs, of course, people in brothels, anything that's, like, considered not the norm, she does. And, like, she's fascinating. And if you want to look at human psychology, like, she's, like, to me, she's, like, so cool, because she honestly, when she takes photographs, like, these people talk to her, and she gets all this sort of, I don't know, like, unsolicited information about, you know, how they've managed to make a life for themselves in this world that's very, like, prejudiced against them. Pretty fascinating. And that might be something to look into. There's also Tennessee Williams, who did, like, what is most famous famous play was Streetcar Named Desire, with the woman Vivian Lee, who played the lead in Gone with the Wind, and Marlon Brando, and some other famous people. And then Paul Newman was in one of his plays that was with Elizabeth Taylor, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. That's been on Broadway and everything. And anyway, basically why I brought him up is because literally all his characters have like serious moral dilemmas, but they're more like a lot of addictions, a lot of codependency, a lot of darker side of people. But it's usually like characters who've like, they were like sort of like good people in society, and then something bad happens to them, and then they just sort of, they're like, okay, well, screw it, I'm just gonna give in to my, I'm just gonna do what makes me feel good to numb the pain. And like Paul Newman, that's his character. He's like, he was a track star. He was like the big athlete, and I don't know what happens to him, but he has some football injury, I think, and like he messes up his leg or something. Well, he can't be this like athlete anymore, even though he's like still in pretty good shape for the movie. But Elizabeth Taylor plays his wife, and it's like he refuses to have relations with her because of his like psychological, he's an alcoholic. It wasn't because of his mental illness, it's because he is like numbing the pain. And he has like that famous line where he's like, he has a drink and he's like, well, I gotta wait for the click. And it's like this famous line because it's like he drinks until something clicks in him and he stops feeling pain, and he is sort of cocooned in this like escapism. So Tennessee Williams is like excellent material to look into psychology of like people, whether they're innocent or quite guilty. And most people are struggling to sort of figure out what their identity is. So I love that book. I was going to talk about 1984, but I'm Blade Runner, but we're running out of time, so I'm going to cut it off. So I had some biblical scripture. Where did it go? Let's see if I can find it, and then we'll be done. Oh, I was going to talk about Lord of the Flies. Dang it. I'm going to do that. I'll do Lord of the Flies by itself because it's so long. I'm sorry about my cats. They're really... Leo! They're excited about this new office. And they will not stop being annoying. Oh, the Bible stuff, yeah. I'm supposed to talk about I can't say it. Maybe it's great I don't talk about it this time. Sodom and Gomorrah, that story in the Bible where the city, like, everybody's like doing whatever they want, like with alcohol and like debauchery and orgies. They're just, everybody in the city is just like sort of fallen prey to like their darker nature. And so God gets mad and he I think he burns it down. And then Lot and his wife, two angels come and they say, God has said we could get you out of here. So they like show them the way, but then Lot's wife, for whatever reason, she can't give up her past. I mean, she wants to just glance back one time, and she glances back and she turns into a pillar of salt. And like kind of like the moral of the story there was that, God is so serious about blotting out sin, or like keeping man keeping man into his, you know, the good part of his nature. That's why I was going to talk about Lord of the Flies, because I'll start off next time with Lord of the Flies, because that's the whole thing. Lord of the Flies is like a book about a group of British schoolboys. I think they're like junior high, and their plane crashes and they end up on this island together. And at first they're kind of enjoying it and just doing whatever they want. They have fires and they have like games and like they're doing okay. But then as time passes and like they're trying to like put out signals so that they'll get picked up, you know, with fires and stuff, with the smoke. But then as time passes, one of the boys decides that he wants to be, it's kind of like Harry Potter, like, what was that kid? Malachi? I don't remember. Like the super platinum blonde kid who was like bad, and then he was really against Harry Potter. It's like, it's kind of like that. Like there's like a good boy and like a bad one, and then they're like in competition, like, well, who's gonna like capture the whole group? The whole group is gonna follow one or the other. Which one is gonna win dominance over the other, you know? So in Lord of the Flies, it's Ralph is like the good one and Jack is like the bad one. And as they're on that island longer and they're hunting, they start to get like more savage, and it sort of goes into like that same theory, like if you could be somewhere and nobody would know, like there were no consequences, like no one's gonna like punish you if you steal or hurt somebody, or I don't know, just do whatever you want. Like they just act really violently overall, and then by the end of the book there's like there's 2 boys are dead. But that whole thing is much like the Tennessee Williams thing. Like it's like, okay, something like bad happened to you, like what are you gonna do? Like you can either go one way or another. Like rarely any of these people in these situations are neutral, you know. They either turn to numbing themselves or they turn to taking advantage of the situation, usually for sex, money, or you know, getting high or something. There's always like some power trip over other people. I don't even know where I was going with this, but anyway, we need to stop. What is my last line? Oh, we're talking about the Bible. Okay, so in terms of like evil in the Bible, I mean like Adam and Eve, blah blah blah. Everybody knows that story, but there's more to the story. There's Lilith, who was before Eve, and that usually doesn't ever get talked about. I can talk about that sometime. And Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark basically was built because God was displeased with the human race. He looked down and saw how people were treating each other and how they were acting just in their just worse characteristics. Like people were more and more turning to treating each other poorly, you know, basically like breaking all the 12 commandments. Is that 12? Did I say 12? Yeah, is that right? 11? Anyway, you know what I mean. And falling into, you know, different, what's it, 7 deadly sins. So God decides to destroy the race of people, the human race. And then, I don't know, he's going to start over, I guess. Oh yeah, because he keeps Noah and like enough animals and people to like start over and create people all over again. And then hopefully they won't choose that again. So those are 2 incidents where there's sort of like a rewrite of people. And I mean, 12 plagues of Egypt. I wouldn't call that having to do with morality. That's, well, that's more like payback for, you know, not letting the people leave and in search of free land. So it's like kind of like teaching them a lesson. And there's a couple instances in the Bible where there's, it's Herod, yeah, where he wants to kill the firstborns. I mean, there's several instances in the Bible where it's like people are so bad. You're like, are people capable of being good? I mean, it's like, is this a choice or just like how people are? So, well, this was probably not my most organized talk, but I hope you learned something. Okay.